Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. What a blessing to be here with you all tonight. I feel like Imam Dawood did a lot of the hard work, and he began the ask. So this is the portion when we ask from you all in this time as we come close to Maghrib and this time when dua is accepted. So we ask all of you, there are envelopes on the table. I'm going to go through a few slides about the incredible work that Wasat does and has been doing. I'm the founder of several nonprofits, including Empower Change, which some of you may know of, including my own organization, the Center for Global Muslim Life. And I also am a business development consultant with a lot of nonprofits. I'm a nonprofit nerd. I've been in this work for 20 years, and we need more of us because we have to do this work well. And so I was brought into WASA as a business development consultant and to help the organization when it was at this amazing stage of growth. I feel like, so many of us in this room, many of us are converts. And then those who aren't converts may have come back to Islam through this organization. And I feel like the reason why converts and people like many of you have such high himmah in this work and why so many of us as converts are out front is because we're planting the seeds, inshallah, for our families and for the next couple hundreds of years for our family to, inshallah, maintain their Islam. But foundationally, we need organizations like this that are rooted in tradition, but where we can belong, where we can be our whole selves and where we're able to seek community wellness. And so that's what we're talking about here tonight. And there was a moment many years ago that many of us met in this room at Ta'leef Collective with our dear friend Osama Cannon, Allah Yahama. And at that meeting, I told Osama, I said, what you're building here isn't an organization, and it's not a brand. What this thing has captured a movement. And here we see 12, 15 years later, 30, 40, 50 organizations doing similar work around the United States and around the world, including WASA, who's on the front lines of doing innovative work to make sure that we're not doing just the community spiritual wellness piece, but we're also doing the service. And so with that, let's go into the slides, because what's amazing about this work is I do a lot of consulting like this, but very rarely do I see numbers like this. So I'm going to nerd out just for a minute. You all roll with me as you're filling out those forms. Inshallah, we're not going to do a hard ask. So this is the ask as we approach Maghrib. Let's go to the next slide. Many of you know the work of Wasat, but at our core, these are the branches of the organization, right? Sacred knowledge, this idea of heart-centric and wellness, our arts and culture work, our work with youth and youth education, and our sustainability and the neighborly needs work, right? Let's go to the next slide. And this is why this work is incredible, okay? So I'm going to speak loudly. In 2017, a group of donors gave $18,000 to this organization. So this is our 10th year anniversary, but in reality, we've been staffed for 5 years. Okay, the next slide. And this slide shows the percentage of grants as overall revenue. So starting with 0%, and a lot of Muslim organizations are not using philanthropy and the foundation world effectively to increase impact. So what that means is those first people who put in that money, their wealth was amplified 10, 20-fold, because now look, where we're an organization that's reaching 60% of income through foundation work. Meaning that every dollar that the community is putting in, it's being doubled and tripled and quadrupled. Next slide. Going from 0 employees again to now 12 over a period of 5 years. This is very rapid growth for a nonprofit. The average nonprofit takes 5 years to get its footing and another 5 years, realistically 10 years, to get in order. That's how hard this work is. I have friends, I love my friends in the tech world and the VC world and all these things who are like, oh, starting a nonprofit's not that hard. Starting a nonprofit is much harder than it is in starting a for-profit business because of what it takes to get your footing with donors, with, the foundation world and all these things. And here it is as an example of that upward growth. I hope you all see a trend here. The next slide. And so this is what I'm calling the Baraka ROI. We don't talk about this, right? We don't quantify. We talk about the return on investments in our investments, and we all have these, stock apps, and maybe Zoya, the halal stock app, all these different things where we're thinking about ROI constantly. But we're not thinking about what the return on investment in Baraka is when we put money into our organizations. And so this is crazy numbers, right? So this is whoever put in that $18,000 in 2017 is 83 times return on Baraka, right? That's like if you invested at Apple in its seed investment, right? That's what that return is like. 2018, it's 20x, right? 2019, et cetera. Even 2021, it's still 2x. You're getting 2x return on your investment. So this is true Baraka investment and that coming into your life. And inshallah, this is just the beginning. Next slide. And then finally, right, and this is the really important one here, is that this is the percentages of restricted grant funding by our departments. So what this says is 60% of those grants and our budget is within neighborly needs. 20% is within youth education. Around 10% is within arts and culture. That means for us to do the spirituality work, for us to hold that space, for us to build wellness in the community, what foundation is funding work for converts? None, right? They're not going to fund that work. So foundationally, you see the return on Baraka, but we have to understand that we constantly have to be asking for that money to be seeded from our community so that we can continue to grow that work at the level we're able to serve. And we understand, of course, the service work is what builds the Baraka of the organization for us to do everything else. But I think it's important to point out that without the community, this is when organizations also get out of balance, right? And so that's where this growth period is so important for Wasat in looking forward. But we have to do it right, and we have to do it with the community and continue to grow our individual donor base. Because especially within nonprofits, true impact is around $1 million annual budget. And what's amazing is if you can be at a 50-50 standpoint. 50% individual donors, 50% foundation and philanthropy donations. Next slide. And so this is where we're going to talk about the future, right? And Ahmed worked on this, and you might be able to say more, and I'll wrap up quickly so that you can close. Is that what would it look like to truly build a home? We know that the biggest gap in this organization is space. But we also know that, like Yusuf was saying, when he was younger and he would come here, none of these apartments in front of the lake were there. So we know how difficult it also is to purchase property in Seattle. But inshallah, that's what we know we have to do next. But let's go into quickly of what that vision would look like. First, of course, would be the sacred space. Go on to the next slide. And this is helping you to imagine a creative, sacred space where it's beautiful and where all would be welcome and could share space, where we don't have imported mosque architecture that many of our institutions have, but where we're able to build something that's sacred while being rooted in our realities here in North America. Next. A performance and event space, having that built in so that we can continue to bring the type of events that Wasat has been bringing to the community for a long time, that is events that otherwise wouldn't be brought to the Seattle community. Next. And just again, some beautiful renditions so that you all can imagine what that could look like. Next. And of course, we all know that it's really important, and this is a growing trend within a lot of the masajid, where you have a cafe out front, and a lot of churches as well, right? Because we should have a waqf built into the institution where we have a cafe and a bookstore, and if we're going to teach people about Islam, they should be able to access it. And so something like a bookstore, it's not easy to find children's literature on Islam. It's not easy to find the spiritual tradition that our lineage is within for many of us, right? And so that's what we imagine. Imagine building that into it, a place where people could constantly come to rather than just during events. Next. I love this slide, right? It's like, what can you imagine? People hanging out at the Wasat bookstore? I mean, let's imagine, right? And let's make dua for it as the time comes. May Allah make it true. I mean, and then of course having the community kitchen, and even more of that, we can imagine even helping to seed businesses that, one of the hardest things for many people in the community, of course, in building like a food business is to have the seed capital. We imagine how do we use entrepreneurship in very creative ways. I was just looking at an organization that does this type of work in San Francisco, where they are an organization that funds work, that helps grow businesses for women and refugees and people of color in particular in San Francisco. They have a $9 million annual budget because that's how cutting edge this work is. This is where WASA can grow into if we continue to push in these directions. Next. Yeah, there's the community kitchen. And finally, right, is having multimedia rooms so that, Ahmed can easily record his world-renowned podcast, mashallah, and so that others can as well. And we could have our cutting-edge video series, and this stuff is easy to make, and that we can shoot those videos like Imam Omar Suleiman is shooting in his amazing studio that they have at Yaqeen and all these things, mashallah. Next, there's the podcast. And then finally, right, having rooftop gardens, inviting the community and just being a hub of Muslim life in the Pacific Northwest. That's what is really possible here, and we know, inshallah, that's what the next 20 years look like. I'll let you take it from here.